Welcome to Founding Chronicles, the place where America's hidden past comes alive. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss these forgotten stories of history. Now, let us step back in time to uncover the forgotten secrets of old America they never told you. Asterisk, the story begins not with battles or famous leaders, but with the silent, everyday lives of people who carried the weight of a new land upon their backs. When we speak of America's past, we often hear the polished tales of great victories, of bold signatures on parchment, and of speeches that shook the earth. But hidden beneath those grand stories are the forgotten secrets, the quiet truths of ordinary men and women whose sweat, sorrow, and sacrifice laid the foundation of a country that would one day rise to be called the land of freedom. In the early days of old America, life was both promise and peril. The settlers who stepped onto this soil did not arrive to a land of easy harvests and safe homes. They came to dense forests where shadows stretched long, where every sound of the night could mean danger, where survival depended not only on faith in God, but on the strength of one's hands. These were people who carried hope across an ocean, leaving behind the graves of their ancestors, the villages of their childhood, and the comfort of familiarity. They risked everything, knowing that many would never see their homeland again. One of the forgotten secrets lies in the very way these people built their lives from nothing. Imagine a family arriving in Virginia in the mid-1600s. The father, worn from months at sea, his face burned by salt and wind. The mother, frail from hunger, holding a child wrapped in rags. Their belongings? A single chest, a Bible, and perhaps a small tool passed down from their fathers. The land they were promised was not cleared farmland, but wild, stubborn ground. And so, day after day, they worked with bleeding hands, cutting trees, shaping logs, raising walls for a house that could barely shield them from winter winds. Every nail was precious, every ember of fire cherished, every loaf of bread a triumph. But behind these struggles were stories that history books seldom tell. There were quiet acts of courage, women who buried children in unmarked graves yet still found the strength to rise at dawn and bake bread for others. Men who fought not for glory, but simply to keep wolves from the door. Families who, though divided by hardship, came together in moments of prayer, their voices rising into the night like a fragile shield against despair. Another secret lies in the way these settlers depended on those often left unnamed. The native tribes who first saw these strange newcomers did not always meet them with war. In many places, it was native hands that taught the starving Europeans how to grow corn, how to find fish in rivers, how to read the signs of the seasons. Yet these acts of kindness, so vital in those early years, were soon buried under stories of conflict. The truth is more complicated. More human moments of friendship, marriage, trade, and shared survival stood alongside the darker tales of betrayal and bloodshed. These truths rarely fit neatly into the pages of history books, but they are part of the soul of America's beginnings. There is also the secret of forgotten town settlements that once pulsed with life, but vanished into the wilderness, their names erased, their houses swallowed by ivy and time. Places like Cahaba in Alabama, once a bustling capital, now nothing but ghosts of brick walls. Or villages along the Atlantic that disappeared after harsh winters, leaving only stone foundations. Hidden under leaves, families lived, dreamed, and died in these places, yet they are rarely spoken of. To walk through these ruins even today is to feel the echo of laughter, the quiet footsteps of children long gone, the heavy silence of prayers whispered by candlelight. And then there is the story of those whose voices were silenced by chains, the men, women, and children torn from Africa and forced to labor in fields they would never call their own. They built homes, laid roads, raised crops, and yet their names seldom appear in the heroic tales. Their hands shaped the wealth of colonies, their songs carried sorrow and strength, and their silent endurance became a hidden foundation of America's story. To speak of old America without them is to leave the truth unfinished dot in the early dawn of this nation. Faith was a lantern carried through darkness. Churches, often nothing more than wooden shacks, became the heart of communities. On Sundays, settlers gathered, dressed in their best, though their clothes were patched and thin. They sang hymns that lifted weary spirits, their voices trembling but strong. The preacher's words were not always of fire and brimstone, but of survival, of holding together when storms beat down and when death came too soon. These gatherings gave birth to a sense of unity, of shared destiny, and it is one of the forgotten secrets that hope was not built by leaders alone, but by ordinary people who refused to let despair win. Even in the Revolutionary years, when muskets cracked and drums rolled, the hidden story was not only in the halls of Congress or the writings of Jefferson. It was in the mother who sent her last son to war, though she knew he might never return. It was in the farmer who left his plow half-turned in the soil to march barefoot with Washington's army. It was in the wives and daughters who managed farms, who spun cloth for soldiers, who carried the weight of absence and loss. Their sacrifices were quiet, often unrecorded, yet without them the war for independence could never have been won. And there were whisper secrets, carried in the wind of ordinary men who became heroes only to fade back into obscurity. Farmers who picked up rifles, fought with valor, and then returned to fields no one remembers. Black soldiers promised freedom for their service, only to be forgotten once the war was over. Women who dressed as men to march in the ranks, their bravery, hidden for generations. These were the stories not told, yet they are the heartbeat of old America. What also lingers in shadow is the story of the land itself. America's forests were once so thick a man could walk for days without seeing sunlight. Rivers roared with unbroken strength, carrying canoes and rafts heavy with furs, corn, and timber. The land was both enemy and ally, punishing and giving, and those who first worked it carved out survival inch by inch. They read the stars, tracked the seasons, and prayed that each harvest would be enough to see them through winter. This relationship with the land, the struggle, the respect, the sacrifices made upon it, is a forgotten chapter in itself. These secrets of old America are not about grand monuments or gilded halls. They are about the ordinary souls who endured hunger, fear, loss, and yet still believed in tomorrow. They tell us that history is not just the story of leaders and wars, but the story of people like us, fathers and mothers, sons and daughters, all striving, suffering, and hoping. Their secrets remain in faded letters, in broken gravestones, in songs sung around firelight. And when we look closely, we find that their story is still our story. The struggle to survive, the fight for dignity, the hope that something better lies just beyond the horizon. The Revolution may have given America its first breath of freedom, but freedom was never complete, never evenly shared, and often came at a cost that most never saw. History remembers the fireworks, the ringing of bells, the triumphant march of soldiers after Yorktown. But behind the cheers, there were shadows, the secrets of those whose sacrifices lay unspoken, who carried burdens in silence, long after the war drums faded. One of these secrets rests in the lives of forgotten soldiers. The Continental Army was not made of polished professionals, but of farmers, blacksmiths, and boys barely old enough to shave. They came with old hunting rifles, patched clothes, and hope burning brighter than their bellies full of hunger. Valley Forge stands today as a symbol, but few can truly imagine the sight of thousands of men with bleeding feet wrapped in rags, the snow stained red with every step. They drilled in the cold, not because of promise of pay. They were rarely paid, but because they could not bear the thought of returning to their homes in chains. The secret is that these men, unnamed in the books, gave a nation its future, then returned quietly to their farms, their graves often marked by nothing more than a stone at the edge of a field. But not all who fought wore the same uniform. There were the forgotten loyalists, men and women who chose to remain true to Britain, believing the rebellion foolish or dangerous. Many lost everything when the war ended. Their homes were burned, their lands taken, their families forced into exile, in Canada or across the seas. They, too, were part of America's story, though their names were erased because they did not stand on the winning side. Yet in their letters, one can still hear their heartbreak, their confusion, their prayers for peace, their silence in horror. Memory is itself a secret, reminding us that history often belongs only to the victors. And then there were the African Americans, both free and enslaved, who fought on both sides with hopes that the war might bring them liberty. Some fought for the Revolution, believing the words, "all men are created equal," would finally mean them. Others fought for the British, promised freedom if they took up arms against the rebels. Thousands risked everything, yet after the smoke cleared, many found themselves betrayed, their chains unbroken. Some were sent away to Nova Scotia, some to Sierra Leone, while countless more were simply forgotten in the soil of battlefields. Their stories were seldom recorded, but their courage was real, their sacrifice just as deep as any patriot. This is one of the heaviest secrets of old America, that liberty was not born pure, but was built on the broken promises to those who gave so much. Women, too, carried hidden roles that time has quietly concealed. We hear of a few Molly Pitcher, Abigail Adams, but for every woman remembered, there were hundreds more whose names never crossed a page. They were the ones who plowed fields alone, who kept small businesses alive, who smuggled messages under baskets of bread, who stood by fires sewing uniforms through the night. Some disguised themselves as men, marching under false names, their bravery revealed only when a musket ball struck their bodies. One such woman, Deborah Sampson, lived and fought as a soldier for years, her true identity hidden until wounds gave her away. But she was not alone. Her story is simply the one history chose to keep, while countless others remain shadows. After the Revolution, America was not instantly the shining beacon we imagine. The land was scarred. Farms lay in ruin, trade routes broken, towns half empty. From loss, debt crushed families, and veterans often wandered home to nothing. The government, young and uncertain, struggled to hold 13 restless states together. The secret of these years is that America almost broke before it began. Rebellions rose, farmers refusing to pay crushing taxes, war heroes standing against the very government they had fought to create. Shays' Rebellion in Massachusetts was not just an uprising, but a cry of despair from men who had carried muskets for freedom, only to be jailed for debt. These struggles are often brushed aside, but they reveal the fragile truth. America was not inevitable. It was fragile, delicate, a dream always one storm away from collapse. Not another secret lies in the frontier. As settlers pushed westward beyond the Appalachians, they entered lands long inhabited by native nations who did not vanish quietly. Wars, treaties, betrayals, and broken promises filled these years. The stories are often told from one side, yet the truth is far more complex. Entire villages of native people were burned, but there were also moments of deep cooperation, trade, even intermarriage. Forgotten names like Dragging Canoe, Cornstalk, or Nancy Ward tell stories of leaders who struggled to preserve their people against overwhelming odds. These were voices of dignity and defiance, yet their stories seldom make it into the classrooms. Their survival, their grief, their resilience, these are part of America's hidden inheritance. And beyond the wars and treaties, there were quieter secrets those of enslaved men and women carving out fragments of humanity in the midst of bondage. On plantations in Virginia, South Carolina, Georgia, they created families, though the law did not recognize them. They sang songs at night that carried coded messages. They told stories to children that carried whispers of Africa. These acts of faith, of culture, of holding on to identity, though history may not record their names, these secrets gave strength to generations that would one day rise and demand freedom in fuller measure. The early republic was also marked by the building of towns, the shaping of a new society. But here, too, are forgotten corners, small communities that blossomed for a decade and then withered away, entire towns erased by floods, fires, or the slow drift of trade routes. Old maps show names that no longer exist, places where thousands once lived, but which are now nothing more than meadows or forests. These ghost towns hold secrets in the soil-rusted tools, fragments of pottery, faded headstones half buried in moss. Each one is a reminder that for every shining city that grew into greatness, there were dozens that fell into silence. And we must not forget the secret struggles of faith. America was never one belief, one church. From the beginning, there were Quakers, Puritans, Anglicans, Baptists, Catholics, Jews, all carving out space in a land that promised freedom but often fell short of it. Quakers who refused to fight were whipped or jailed. Catholics faced suspicion. Jews were tolerated but often kept at arm's length. And yet, despite these hardships, faith communities endured, prayed, and built sanctuaries that stand even now. The secret is that religious freedom was not a gift fully given at the start. It was fought for, lived for, defended by those who refused to let their voices be silenced. These forgotten secrets remind us that America was not born in a single moment of triumph. It was shaped in shadows, in struggles, in losses that history rarely records. It was carried not just by the famous names etched in marble, but by countless souls who lived and died, believing that tomorrow might be better. They are the ones who built homes only to see them burned, who marched in wars only to vanish into obscurity, who prayed with trembling hands and yet carried on. And perhaps the greatest secret of all is this: old America was never perfect. Never. Easy, never guaranteed. It was messy, painful, full of contradictions. But it was alive with hope, with courage, with stubborn faith in a dream bigger than any single person. That is the story we inherit, a story not just of what was told, but of what was hidden, waiting for us to uncover. The dawn of the 1800s brought with it both promise and peril. The Revolution had ended, the Constitution had been written, and the United States was still a fragile experiment in liberty. To many, it was a new age, a nation free to shape its destiny. But beneath the bright talk of freedom and opportunity, there were truths unspoken, secrets buried deep in the soil of old America. The first of these lies in the story of westward expansion. History often paints this as a noble march of pioneers, wagons rolling into the sunset, families carving new lives out of untamed land. But the reality was far heavier. Every step westward was a collision of worlds. Native nations had lived on these lands for centuries, building cultures, farming fields, hunting forests. The promise of empty land was never true. And so, expansion meant displacement, treaties signed and broken, promises made and abandoned. Entire nations like the Cherokee, Creek, and Choctaw were forced to walk the trail of tears, their children dying by the roadside, their songs fading into the wilderness. This was one of old America's darkest secrets, that the dream of new beginnings for some was purchased with the heartbreak of others. The frontier life itself carried secrets that often escaped the glossy pictures in history books. Families who moved westward did not always find fertile soil or peaceful valleys. They faced isolation so deep that neighbors were miles away. Illness struck without mercy. A child's fever could take a life before sunrise, and there was no doctor, no medicine, only prayers whispered in candlelight. Women endured childbirth alone, their cries echoing through log cabins. Men broke their backs against stony soil, often to find it barren. Countless families who sought fortune instead found graves dug in the wilderness, their names lost as quickly as they had come. The silence of their stories is a secret carried in the earth, where forgotten bones rest beneath farms and fields. And yet, even in hardship, there were moments of beauty rarely spoken of. Neighbors who risked everything to help one another. Communities who gathered in makeshift churches, lifting voices in hymns that carried across valleys. Families who told stories by the fire, weaving hope into children's hearts even as wolves howled outside. These small, unseen acts of courage were the real backbone of America's expansion quiet resilience. Unrecorded but deeply real. Industry, too, carried its hidden truths. The 1800s saw the rise of factories, mills, and cities booming with life. But behind the glittering talk of progress was the grind of labor. Men worked 12, 14 hours a day, their lungs filling with soot, their hands calloused and scarred. Women and children bent over machines in textile mills, their small fingers nimble enough to tie threads, their backs aching from endless hours. Fires broke out in crowded buildings, and many never escaped. These workers rarely saw their names in newspapers, but their sweat powered the engines of progress. Their forgotten sacrifices are part of the old American story, one we seldom honor, not another. Secret lies in the railroads, the great steel veins that tied the nation together. We often hear of tycoons and visionaries, but not of the Chinese immigrants who laid track across deserts and mountains, blasting through rock with dynamite, often dying in silence far from home. Their labor was cheap, their lives expendable in the eyes of those who profited. They built bridges that still stand, tunnels carved through solid stone, yet their names vanished, buried beneath prejudice and time. To remember old America is to remember them too, for without their sacrifice, the dream of a connected nation might never have been realized. Slavery, too, deepened its grip in this century. While the Declaration of Independence had spoken of liberty, millions remained in bondage. Their voices were silenced by law, but their courage lived in secret ways. Families sang coded songs in the fields, carrying maps of escape within the old. Verses. Mothers braided grains of rice into their daughters' hair, a hidden gift for survival should they ever break free. The Underground Railroad was not a shining highway, but a dangerous whisper, a series of hidden hands guiding fugitives from one shadow to the next. Each safe house, each barn loft, each whispered prayer was a secret act of defiance, a spark of freedom in the dark. These were the unseen heroes of old America, ordinary men and women who risked their lives to save strangers, bound together by nothing but the belief in human dignity. And then came the Civil War, tearing the nation apart. History often tells it in battles and generals, but the true weight of it lived in the hearts of ordinary people. A farm boy from Ohio kissing his mother goodbye, never to return. A Southern girl stitching a flag with trembling hands while her brothers marched off to war. A black soldier, finally allowed to fight for freedom, charging into fire with the hope that his sacrifice would change the future. The secret of the Civil War is that it was not only about soldiers, but about families, about widows and orphans, about fields left untended, about churches that prayed for peace while cannons roared miles away. Even after the war ended, the secrets of suffering lingered. Freedmen, newly emancipated, faced not open arms, but hatred, violence, and laws designed to chain them once again. Many fled north, seeking new beginnings, only to find poverty and prejudice waiting. Families torn apart by slavery searched desperately for one another, posting ads in newspapers, traveling miles on rumors, clinging to the hope that reunion was still possible. Their stories are seldom told, but in their determination lies one of the deepest truths of America, the refusal to surrender hope, even in the face of heartbreak. The 1800s also carried the secret of forgotten towns born of gold and silver. The gold rush drew thousands to California, to the Rockies, to the Black Hills. Men abandoned families, chasing glitter in the earth. Some struck it rich, but most found only exhaustion and disappointment. Entire towns sprang up overnight saloons, dance halls, gambling dens, and just as quickly disappeared when the mines ran dry. Today, ghost towns stand as echoes of these dreams, their buildings collapsing, their windows shattered by time. Each one is a secret story of human hope and human failure, hidden beneath dust and silence. And while fortune hunters chased gold, the native nations faced their darkest hour. Broken treaty after broken treaty pushed them into smaller and smaller lands. The massacre at Wounded Knee in 1890 was not just a battle, but a tragedy where hundreds of men, women, and children were cut down as snow fell on the plains. Their voices, their prayers, their songs echo still, a haunting reminder of a story too often silenced. The secret of America's rise is that it was built on both promise and pain, triumph and tragedy interwoven so tightly that one cannot be told without the other. A century closed with the rise of cities New York, Chicago, Boston glittering with light, yet beneath the glow lay shadows. Immigrants poured in, seeking new lives. Irish families fleeing famine, Italians escaping poverty, Jews running from persecution, Germans seeking opportunity. They arrived with hope, but found slums, tenements crammed with disease and hunger. Children worked in factories, fathers broke. Under long hours, mothers took in laundry and sewing to survive. Yet from these hardships rose communities of resilience parishes, festivals, songs, and traditions carried across the ocean and planted in American soil. Their secrets are not of glory, but of endurance, of clinging to culture and faith in the face of hardship. And among them, stories of quiet greatness flourished. A black man in New York opening a school for children when the law said none should exist. A poor immigrant girl saving pennies to buy books, later teaching others to read. A freed slave publishing a newspaper, his words carrying truth that could not be silenced. These are not the tailies carved into marble monuments, but they are the flesh and blood secrets of old America. What makes these secrets powerful is not just the suffering they hold, but the humanity they reveal. For every forgotten soldier, there was a mother who prayed. For every lost town, there were children who once played in its streets. For every broken promise, there were voices that still sang of freedom. Old America was not only a land of ideals, but a land of contradictions, where hope and heartbreak walked hand in hand out as the 19th century closed. America stood on the edge of a new era, one of machines, inventions, railroads, and cities reaching skyward. But beneath the steel and smoke, beneath the grand speeches and triumphs, the secrets of ordinary people still lived, waiting to be remembered. The new century arrived with thunder. The 1900s opened on an America that believed itself strong, hopeful, unstoppable. The Statue of Liberty rose in New York Harbor, her torch lifted high, greeting ships crowded with tired faces who dreamed of freedom. But the secrets of old America had not disappeared. They were woven into the very bones of the nation, whispers of hardship, echoes of sacrifice, truths too heavy for the polished pages of history. At Ellis Island, the gates of hope swung open for millions. Families poured in from Italy, Ireland, Russia, Poland, and far beyond. They arrived with calloused hands, bundles of clothes, and prayers whispered in a dozen different tongues. They kissed the ground, believing they had found heaven. But heaven often looked like a crowded tenement, one room for 6, sometimes 10 souls. The air thick with smoke, water leaking down cracked walls, streets thick with garbage. Fathers worked long hours in factories for pennies. Mothers scrubbed floors in strange homes. Children sold newspapers on corners or crawled into machines too dangerous for grown men. The secret of America's golden door was that it did not lead to easy wealth, but to struggle, sweat, and survival. Yet in these shadows, beauty bloomed. Churches built by immigrants, filled with hymns in languages long left behind. Neighborhoods lit up with festivals, candles in windows, music spilling from taverns, laughter carrying into night. Stories were passed from father to son, mother to daughter, preserving the roots of faraway homelands while planting them in American soil. These small acts of memory and resilience gave shape to a nation that was not one people, but many woven together by hardship and hope. The factories that powered America's rise were temples of toil, and inside them lived secrets written in sweat. A Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire of 1911 revealed the cruel truth of industrial labor. Young women, most of them immigrants, locked in rooms high above the city, perished when flames swept through, their bodies falling like shadows against the skyline. Their cries forced a nation to reckon with the price of progress. Yet their names, their faces, the lives they dreamed of, those faded quickly while the machines kept turning. This, too, is part of old America's hidden story, that its greatness was built not only by invention, but by sacrifice, often silent, often forgotten. The farmers carried their own secrets. While cities grew, the countryside still fed the nation. Men rose before dawn. Women churned butter and tended children, hands roughened by endless work. But beneath the rolling fields lay struggles unseen, droughts that left land cracked and empty, locust swarms that devoured months of labor in hours, debt that chained farmers to banks, their dreams fading with each unpaid note. Many lost their farms, packed wagons once more, and wandered in search of new soil. The myth of endless opportunity often collided with the truth of poverty and loss. Then came the call to war, first in Europe's Great War, later across the Pacific and the Atlantic. America's young men marched in uniform, carrying rifles, their hearts pounding with both fear and pride. They fought in trenches thick with mud, gas, and death. They stormed beaches, crossed seas, endured winters far from home. Many never returned. Those who did were forever changed, haunted eyes, broken bodies, silence that could not be explained. The secret of these wars is not only in the victories or the flags raised high, but in the quiet suffering that lingered long after the parades ended. Families who kept empty chairs at dinner tables, mothers who never stopped waiting at windows, wives who carried on with hearts half buried in the soil of foreign fields. And behind these soldiers stood women who filled factories, built weapons, drove trucks, nursed the wounded, and kept families alive. They carried burdens heavy as any battlefield, yet their names seldom appear in the history books. Their strength was quiet, but unbreakable, the kind that keeps a nation standing when its men are far from home. Their forgotten contributions remain one of America's most powerful, untold truths. The early 20th century also saw the rise of voices that had long been silenced. Black Americans, no longer bound by slavery, but still shackled by segregation, carried their struggle northward in the Great Migration. They built communities in Harlem, Chicago, Detroit, bringing with them songs, art, and unshakable resilience. Yet they faced hatred, riots, and the burning cross of the Klan. Still, their voices rose, jazz spilling from clubs, poetry echoing from crowded streets, sermons ringing from pulpits. These were not just notes and words, but survival itself. The secret of their story is that through music, faith, and art, they carved dignity where society denied it, giving America some of its most enduring gifts. Native nations, too, carried stories into the new century, though the world around them tried to silence their tongues and erase their traditions. Children were taken from families, placed in schools where they were forbidden to speak their own languages, their hair cut, their clothes stripped away. Yet in secret, in whispers, in songs sung softly at night, they kept their heritage alive. Today, those voices echo, reminding us that despite everything, they endured. Their survival is a secret victory, a testament to strength that refused to die. As America grew into an industrial giant, wealth gathered in the hands of a few, while countless others labored unseen. Tycoons built mansions, their names carved into buildings. But in coal mines, steel mills, and rail yards, men risked their lives daily, often never living to see old age. Strikes broke out, protests rose, workers demanding dignity. Some were beaten, jailed, or killed, their names lost in company records. The secret of America's prosperity is that it was carried on the shoulders of those who never shared in its riches. And yet, even in hardship, ordinary people built legacies of hope. Teachers in one-room schoolhouses lit fires in young minds, their chalkboards filled with lessons that would shape generations. Doctors rode miles on horseback to deliver babies in cabins. Neighbors shared food when cupboards were bare. Families sat on porches at dusk, telling stories that tied them to the past while dreaming of tomorrow. These small, everyday acts of faith and kindness were the true heart of old America. They are the secrets that rarely make headlines but live. In the marrow of who we are. By the time the First World War ended, by the time the Roaring Twenties danced, by the time the Great Depression struck like a hammer, America had changed forever. The old ways, horse-drawn plows, candles flickering in windows, towns where everyone knew your name, were slipping away. Factories roared, radios sang, skyscrapers touched the clouds. Yet beneath the modern face, the forgotten secrets of old America still lingered. In the dust of ghost towns, in the hymns of black churches, in the stories of immigrant grandmothers, in the faded letters of soldiers, there lived the truth that America was not born of ease, but of sacrifice. Not of perfection, but of endurance. That is the final secret of old America. It was never about heroes carved in marble or victories shouted in history books. It was about people, ordinary, unseen, enduring people who believed in something greater than themselves. Their names may be forgotten, but their lives built the foundation upon which everything else stands. When we speak of America, we speak not only of presidents and generals, but of mothers who buried children, fathers who worked themselves to exhaustion, immigrants who carried hope across oceans, soldiers who marched into fire, slaves who sang freedom into being, and native voices that refused to be silenced. Their secrets live still, in the quiet of forgotten cemeteries, in the war wood of old farmhouses, in the stories passed around kitchen tables. They live in us, whether we know it or not. And if we listen closely, if we open our hearts, we will hear them whispering still. We were here. We endured. We believed. We dreamed. It is the forgotten story of old America. Not polished, not perfect, but human, aching, striving, beautiful in its struggle. It is the story they never told you, but the one that still beats quietly beneath the surface of this land we call home.